Welcome back to Let's Connect, your destination for peak experience. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. Today we're going to be talking about the Charlie Kirk situation and, more importantly, what it reveals about us. What I find interesting is the conversation about Charlie Kirk and what it has revealed about us as a people, as a society, and how we relate to each other. The online conversation following the death of Charlie Kirk has been eye-opening, not because of what was said about him or the man himself. Personally, I don't find Charlie Kirk interesting. Here's a good breakdown of the views of Charlie Kirk, and you can take a view of this and form your own opinion. The link is in the description. Instead, I want to examine the discourse around Charlie Kirk and the subtle ways it can fracture our relationships. An event like this is a stress test for our connections, a good reminder of how deeply our political identities are intertwined with our personal ones. I've observed that 4 distinct conversations are happening all at once. Recognizing which one someone is having with you is crucial. It can help you decide whether the conversation is worth having and if it will have any value, or if the potential consequences to your relationship outweigh the benefits of the conversation. Let's dive into these 4 conversations and see what they mean for you. Conversation number 1, the act itself, the shooting. This is the most immediate and visceral conversation, focusing on the horror of the event itself. Conversation number 2 is Charlie Kirk, the man. This conversation is about the man himself, his legacy, his viewpoints, and his on-the-record statements. Conversation 3, what this means for us, the social implications. This conversation moves beyond the specifics of the event and the man, and into the broader social fabric of everything. Conversation 4, the political, legislation, entanglements. Finally, there is the political conversation. This is where the event is used as a springboard for advocating for one's specific policies. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into it. So conversation number 1, the act itself, the shooting. The first conversation in many ways is the most essential. It centers around the sheer horror of the act itself, the public assassination of a public speaker. This is a conversation about the victims, including Charlie Kirk, his family, eyewitnesses, and his supporters. This conversation deserves our utmost empathy, a statement I will be gladly and unapologetically make. Charlie did not deserve to be assassinated, especially not in front of his wife and children. When you find yourself in this conversation, the best thing to do is to keep it there. There is no need to clarify or qualify your position with, but he also said, well, I don't agree with him. However, one's personal views on the man's politics are utterly irrelevant to the tragedy that unfolded. The raw human experience of witnessing a loved one's life end so violently transcends political divides. His widow and children will likely never be the same after witnessing such a horrific event, and I wish them healing and peace during this unimaginable, difficult time. And this is even compounded by the fact that they're also doing this in public. Now, this is only one of 4 conversations that has the power to bring people together. It is an opportunity to connect on a basic, compassionate level. When you see a friend or family member posting a message of sympathy or grief, that is not an endorsement of his politics. It is an expression of shared humanity. To challenge that position with politics is to miss the point entirely and to risk a deep and potentially irreparable rift in your relationships. This conversation is not a debate. It is simply an act of empathy. Moving on to conversation number 2, Charlie Kirk, the man. This part of the conversation is where the real political friction begins. It's where people turn from tragedy of the event to the man himself, citing his on-the-record statements, videos, and beliefs. There is abundance of evidence available for this for you to understand who he was as a public figure. And this is where the first major problem arises, a clash between those who want to discuss the facts and those who wish to either retreat to the first conversation or paint a scintillized picture that aligns with their political narrative. This is where you are faced with a choice. If someone is determined to rearrange history, ignore blatant facts, or pretend that his on-the-record statements are not what they seem, that should tell you all you need to know about the nature of that conversation. When a person is unwilling to engage with the facts, the value of continuing the debate plummets to 0. This is especially true online. The question you must ask yourself is this: how many times has someone genuinely changed their opinion or view on a fundamental issue in a Facebook argument? The answer is probably in the single digits, if not 0. These online battles are not about persuasion, they are performance. We argue not to convince our opponents, but to signal our identity to our social groups and to win in the court of public opinion. So what should we do when this happens? Understanding this dynamic is your key to disengaging. Instead of getting pulled into an endless, emotionally draining exchange, you can recognize that you are not dealing with a good faith discussion. You're dealing with an act of ideological defense. This recognition gives you the power to choose what's best for your own well being. And on top of that, to preserve your relationships from a debate that was never designed to be won in the first place. This moves us to conversation number 3, the social implications. This conversation moves beyond the specifics of the man and the act and into the broader social landscape. As one would expect, this is where we see tribalism in full force, with the events being used to create an us versus them mentality that widens the chasm between the right and the left. It's a prime example of how political events can become catalysts for the destruction of relationships. Whether those relationships should be held intact is a separate issue, but the fact is they will be fractured regardless. On the off chance, if you ever needed evidence for the creation of echo chambers, this is how they are created. In this case, the shooting can be entered in as Exhibit A, or if you want to go back to recent memory, you can look at the COVID vaccine as another example. This tragic event underscores a painful truth about our modern lives. We are living too much online and not interacting with real people enough. Online discourse has all the heat of a real life conversation, but none of the accountability or empathy. It's a space where we can lob insults from the cheap seats and not see the other person on the other side of our screen. Person on the other side of the screen is not a person. They are the enemy. They are them. They are not like us. So what should we do? The most common and least effective way to handle this situation is to try to prove the other side wrong. That approach almost never works because emotions often act as a more powerful judge of being right than the facts. If you truly want to bridge the gap, a more productive path is to simply ask clarifying questions. This simple act keeps both sides at the table. Instead of debating, you are seeking to understand. When you ask, could you explain what you mean by that? Or can you give me an example? You're forcing the other person to articulate their position more clearly. And when they do, you should repeat back their answers to them, but not to mock them, simply to make sure that you are on the same page and understanding. This shows you are listening, you are engaged, and you are trying to understand their perspective. It reveals the truth of their position to you and to them, without you ever having to inject your own opinion. This is not a guaranteed path to conversion, but it is a guaranteed path to a more productive conversation. It moves the interaction from destructive online battles to a human exchange, one that has a chance of preventing the kind of deep emotional and relational damage that events like this so often cause. Last is the political side of this, or the legislation entanglements. The fourth and final conversation is the political one, where the event is used as a tool for legislation and political maneuvering. As we've seen, this is an opportunity for both sides to vilify the other, not because it's productive, but because it's politically expedient. To a politician, this is audio gold. As long as we are at each other's throats, they don't have to change a single law. It is the ultimate distraction for legislative inaction. This conversation also inevitably brings up the topic of gun control. I am confidently pessimistic that nothing will change. Despite these staggering statistics on gun violence, many Americans cling to their guns. Particularly, you can look at military-style rifles such as the AR-15 under a false sense of security and control. The most common argument I hear is that these weapons are necessary to stop the government from overreaching, quoting the Second Amendment, that sort of thing. However, a moment of applied brainpower reveals how idiotic that is. What is your AR-15 going to do against any of these things? Tanks, drones, aircraft carriers? Is your AR-15 really going to shoot a drone out of the sky that's miles away that you can't even see? Doesn't even make sense. What is your AR-15 going to do if the government decides to cut off your water, your gas, your electricity, or hell, even the internet? Americans cling to guns under the false sense of security. It is not more complicated than that. People love guns because they simply make them feel better. And that feeling is prioritized over public safety. So now, what should we do if we're having this fourth conversation? As you'd expect, my recommendation is not to engage with people who believe preventable gun deaths are the acceptable price for you to have your own gun to stop a government from being tyrannical that has drones. If you're going to sit down with someone and work together to draft legislation that can appease both sides of the political spectrum, then by all means, I am all for it. Otherwise, attempting to convince someone that a gun does not actually make them safer is an exercise in futility. It is better to use your energy to support people and policies that align with your views rather than wasting it on unproductive online arguments. So that is my perspective on this situation. It is about the conversation about the conversation. That is why I find most interesting and what it reveals about us, and more importantly, how you can move and operate in this heated climate so that you can protect your friendships and also help you protect your mental well-being, because that is more important than winning an online debate. Until next time, let's connect.